It started on a quiet Thursday afternoon in the small town of Bend, Oregon. Laura Bennett, a 46-year-old woman with soft gray eyes and calm manners, stood in her upstairs bathroom staring at a crack that had spread along the corner of the tiled wall. Her husband, Tom, had promised to fix it for months, but work always came first. The house felt large and hollow, every room holding pieces of a marriage that had quietly lost its color. She wasn't angry, just tired of feeling invisible. When she finally called for a handyman, she didn't expect much, just someone to patch the wall and leave. The next morning, the doorbell rang, and a young man stood there holding a toolbox. "Mrs. Bennett, I'm Ethan Miller," he said with a polite smile. He couldn't have been more than His jacket was dusted with paint, his hands rough but steady. "Yes, come in," Laura said, stepping aside. "The bathroom's upstairs." Ethan followed her up, his boots leaving faint marks on the wooden stairs. The house smelled faintly of lavender cleaner and coffee. When they reached the bathroom, he looked around with quick precision. "You've got a small leak behind the wall," he said. "That's what caused the crack." Laura nodded. "Figures. Everything in this house feels a little broken lately." He smiled briefly. "That's what I'm here for." She sat on a small upholstered bench near the window, the one she used to sit on when she read or talked to her husband on long evenings. Now, it was mostly where she sat to think. Ethan unpacked his tools, and the steady rhythm of his work filled the air. The scrape of his trowel, the low hum he made while focusing it, all mixed with the sound of soft rain outside. "You can sit there if you like," he said, glancing at her. "Just might get a little dusty." "I'll take my chances," she replied. "This bench has survived worse," he chuckled. "Looks like it's got stories." "Maybe one or two," she said, smiling. Something about his tone disarmed her. He wasn't flirtatious or bold, just kind, and that was something she hadn't felt in a long time. For a moment, she forgot how quiet the house usually was. The next day, Ethan returned to finish sealing the crack. Tom was away again at a business conference in Seattle. Laura didn't mind. She had grown used to making dinner for one, watching TV alone, and pretending the silence didn't bother her. But when Ethan came by, the house suddenly seemed to breathe again. He arrived early, carrying new tiles and a bucket of grout. "Hope you don't mind me starting a little sooner," he said. "Wanted to catch the light." "Course not," Laura replied. "Coffee?" "That would be great," he said, smiling. She poured 2 cups, and they shared a quiet morning. He talked about his works, mall repairs, old houses, clients who told him stories about their lives. She listened, surprised at how icily he spoke. He asked her about the home, about when she and her husband had moved in. Laura hesitated but answered honestly. "We built it 15 years ago. Thought it would be our forever place. It still is, I guess. It just feels different now." Houses change when people do. Sometimes the cracks show up because something underneath needs attention. His words struck her. It sounded like he was talking about more than walls. After a few hours, Ethan stood up, stretching his shoulders. "You've got a solid home here," he said. "It just needed a little care." "Everything does," she said softly. When he packed up to leave, Laura felt an odd pang of disappointment. She told herself it was just because he had made the house feel lively again. But when she found a note he left on the kitchen counter, "Got the tiles I need. Back tomorrow morning. Don't worry, I'll finish it right." Her heart did a small, surprising flutter. She pinned the note to the fridge without knowing why. The next morning Laura woke earlier than usual. She brushed her hair, made fresh coffee, and opened the curtains to let the light in. She hadn't done that in weeks. When Ethan knocked, she was sitting on the bathroom sofa, reading a magazine. "Morning," he said cheerfully. Stepping inside, "Morning," she replied. Smiling back, he began mixing grout while humming an old song. Laura recognized the tune. "My mother used to play that," she said. He looked up, a little surprised. "Away. My grandma loved it too. Small world," Laura said. "Or just small comforts," he replied. "Songs like that make work go smoother." She nodded. "Keep singing then. It makes the house feel alive." He smiled and went back to work, his voice filling the room. It wasn't perfect singing, but it was warm and steady. Like someone who didn't mind being real, Laura sat there watching quietly. It wasn't attraction in the usual sense, it was something gentler. It's like watching a moment you know won't last but want to hold on to anyway. She thought about how often she had felt unseen, how even in her marriage she had stopped being noticed as a person and become part of the furniture-liable, unchanging quiet. The rain started again, soft against the window. Ethan wiped his hands, stood up, and examined his work. "All done," he said finally. "No more leaks." Laura looked at the smooth wall. It was perfect. "It looks like new," she said. "Sometimes it just takes time and care," he said. She smiled faintly. "You've done more than fix a wall, you know?" He blinked. "What do you mean?" "Never mind," she said quickly, realizing how strange it sounded. "I just mean, thank you." He nodded, slinging his tool bag over his shoulder. "You don't have to thank me. You just needed someone to notice what was broken." That simple sentence stayed in her mind long after he left. She walked through the house, touching the walls, the windows, the photos on the mantel. It wasn't about Ethan, it was about remembering that she was still alive, still capable of feeling something beyond routine. That evening she called Tom just to check in. He answered quickly, distracted as always. "Everything okay?" he asked. "Yes," she said. "The leaks fixed." "Good," he said. "Listen, I might stay another few days. They're offering extra meetings." "Course," she replied. She wanted to tell him she missed him, but the words didn't come. After they hung up, she stood in silence. The only sound was the faint dripping of the rain outside. She went upstairs again, sat on the bathroom sofa, and looked at the tiles. They gleamed under the light, freshly sealed, solid. For some reason, that sight made her want to cry. Not out of sadness, but because it reminded her that even broken things could look new again. When she finally turned off the lights, she whispered to herself, "Sometimes the smallest repair changes everything." In the days that followed, Laura noticed how different the house felt. She opened windows she hadn't opened in months. She played soft music while cooking. She even baked a pie and gave half to her neighbor. Something she hadn't done since Tom's business trips had become routine. But at night, when the house felt quiet again, her mind drifted back to that simple note Ethan left, the one still pinned to the fridge. It wasn't love or longing she felt, just a deep recognition of how human it is to crave connection, to want someone to look up from their work and see you as more than a background presence. She didn't see Ethan again after that week. The job was done, his payment mailed, his number deleted from her phone history. Yet every time she passed the bathroom, she felt a quiet warmth. The walls held no secrets, but they reminded her of something she had forgotten, a part of herself that still wanted to feel visible, appreciated, a live dot in that way. Ethan hadn't crossed any lines, and neither had she. But something had shifted deep within her, a small, invisible crack that had finally been sealed. 3 months passed since Ethan had finished the repairs, and spring slowly began to warm the small town of Bend. Laura Bennett moved through her days with a quiet rhythm, watering her plants, working part-time at the local library, and keeping in touch with her grown daughter Hannah, who called every Sunday. On the surface, life looked the same. But deep down, Laura knew something had changed. The bathroom no longer felt like just a room. Every time she walked past it, she felt a faint reminder of that week, the sound of steady hands repairing. Something she didn't even know was broken inside her. Tom had returned from Seattle shortly after Ethan's last visit. He was polite, distant, and more focused on his phone than her stories. When Laura told him about the repairs, he had nodded absently. "Glad it's sorted," he said, not even asking who had done the work. That simple indifference hurt more than anger could. She realized how far they had drifted, not from a single argument, but from hundreds of small silences that had slowly filled the space between them. One Saturday afternoon, Laura decided to visit the local hardware store. She wanted to buy some paint to freshen up the kitchen walls. When she stepped inside, the smell of sawdust and metal filled the air. She walked through the aisles, scanning color samples. When she heard a familiar voice behind her, "Careful with that one, it's brighter than it looks once it's on the wall," said a warm voice. Laura turned and froze. "Ethan." He looked up, surprised, but smiling. "Mrs. Bennet." "Wow, it's been a while." She couldn't help but smile back. "Has. I didn't expect to see you here, and work here part-time," he said, wiping his hands. "Trying to start my own renovation business. Still doing odd jobs to keep things going." "It's great," she said. "You were always good at what you do." He shrugged, modestly. "I try." For a moment, neither spoke. The hum of the store filled the silence. Laura noticed how much lighter he seemed, more confident, less shy. There was something reassuring about seeing him again. "So," he said, nodding at the paint cans in her cart, "another project?" "I was thinking of repainting the kitchen. I figured I could handle it this time." He grinned. "That's brave. Painting can be tricky." Laura laughed softly. "Then maybe I should ask for professional advice." Ethan's eyes sparkled. "Well, I'm free tomorrow. If you want, I can help you pick the right shade." She hesitated, then nodded. "All right, tomorrow works." The next day, the sound of his truck pulling into the driveway made her heart race for reasons she didn't want to analyze. He stepped out wearing the same work jacket she remembered. A little more worn now. Inside, they set up the paint supplies in the kitchen. The afternoon light streamed through the windows, making everything glow golden. "Warm colors suit this space," Ethan said. "Something that feels like sunlight." Laura smiled. "You talk about paint like it's poetry," he chuckled. "Maybe it is. Paint changes how a place feels just like people do." As they worked side by side, Laura realized how natural their conversations were. They talked about small things, his plans for his business, her volunteer work at the library, their favorite places to eat in town. He made her laugh easily, something she hadn't done freely in years. By evening, the first coat was done. The walls looked brighter already. Ethan stepped back, wiping his hands on a rag. "Looks better, doesn't it?" Laura nodded. "It does. You have a gift. You know that?" He smiled, a little embarrassed. "Thanks. I like making things look new again." She looked at the wall, then at him. "You do that well." There was a pause, gentle but full. For a brief second, their eyes made just long enough to feel something unspoken pass between them. Then Laura looked away. "I should make us some tea," she said quickly. He nodded. "Sure." When she came back with 2 mugs, they sat by the counter watching the paint dry. The silence was peaceful, but underneath it, there was a subtle current, something warm. Fragile and uncertain, Ethan finally spoke. "You seem different," he said quietly. Laura tilted her head. "Different how?" "Lighter," he said. "The first time I came here, you looked tired, like the house had more life than you did. But now, you look alive again." The words made her throat tighten. "That's kind of you to say." "It's true," he replied softly. Laura didn't know how to respond. The truth was, he was right. Since that first repair, she had begun to notice herself again, her reflection, her laughter, her dreams. Not because of Ethan himself, but because of what he reminded her, that she still mattered. When he left that evening, he paused by the door. "I'll come back tomorrow to help with the second coat," he said. "That's not necessary," Laura said. "You've already done enough." "I want to," he said gently. "Let me finish what I started." She nodded slowly. "All right. Tomorrow, then?" That night, Laura couldn't sleep. She sat by the window, watching the soft glow of streetlights. She knew the line she was walking was thin. This wasn't about romance. Not yet, but it was about attention, warmth, connection. She missed those things deeply. Still, she didn't want to be the kind of woman who sought them in someone else's presence. She wanted to feel them in her own life. The next day, Ethan returned as promised. They finished painting together, talking less this time, but sharing quiet glances that said enough. When it was done, the kitchen looked brand new, warm, bright, alive. Laura smiled. "You've given this room a second chance." He shook his head. "You gave it to yourself. I just helped." Before leaving, he placed a small business card on the counter. "In case you need help again," he said. "For the house, I mean," Laura smiled. "Thank you, Ethan." After he left, she held the card in her hand longer than she should have. She tucked it into her drawer, feeling a mixture of gratitude and confusion. It wasn't attraction she felt, it was renewal. But even renewal can feel dangerous when you've been numb for too long. Days turned into weeks. Tom noticed the freshly painted kitchen, but said nothing beyond, "Looks nice." Laura nodded, realizing that his silence no longer hurt as much. Instead, it made her more determined to stop waiting for him to notice her. She joined a community garden, started attending yoga classes, and even began journaling again, something she hadn't done since her daughter left for college. Still, every now and then, she caught herself thinking about Ethan's easy laughter, his calm presence. The way he had seen her not as someone's wife, but as a person. One rainy evening, a knock sounded on her door. When she opened it, she saw Ethan standing there, soaked from the rain. "Sorry to drop by unannounced," he said. "I was nearby working on another job and thought I'd check if the paint held up." "It's perfect," Laura said, smiling. "You didn't have to come all this way." He shrugged. "Didn't mind? It's nice to see the result of good work." They talked for a while, standing by the doorway, listening to the rain. There was something different about this moment, like both of them knew this would be the last time they'd see each other for a long while. Finally, Ethan said, "You don't need me anymore, do you?" Laura blinked. "What do you mean?" "You fixed what needed fixing," he said gently. "Not just the house." She smiled sadly. "Maybe. But thank you for reminding me I could." Gave a small nod, rain dripping from his jacket. "Take care of yourself, Mrs. Bennet." "You too, Ethan," she said. He left quietly, disappearing into the rain. Laura stood there for a while, listening to the sound of the storm fading into the distance. She felt something inside her settle, like the end of a chapter she hadn't realized she was writing. That night, she walked into the kitchen and ran her hand along the smooth, bright wall. For the first time in years, she felt content, not because someone had noticed her, but because she had noticed herself. The young handyman had repaired more than cracks and paint. He had repaired a quiet heart. Summer had arrived quietly in Bend, Oregon. The flowers outside Laura Bennett's house bloomed in soft waves of color. And for the first time in years, she took the time to notice them. The days were long and bright, filled with the hum of bees and the smell of warm grass. Life had slowed down, and Laura had found a kind of peace in that stillness. It had been nearly 3 months since she last saw Ethan. Sometimes she wondered how he was doing. His renovation business had taken off. If he was still fixing broken homes and leaving quiet lessons behind wherever he went. But she didn't dwell on it the way she used to. He had been a chapter in her life, not the whole story. Her husband, Tom, had been home more lately. His business trips had reduced, though he still spent long hours in his study. They didn't talk much at first, both unsure how to fill the space between them. But one evening, as Laura set the table for dinner, Tom said something unexpected. "You've been different lately," he said. Laura froze slightly. "Different how?" "You seem lighter," he said, choosing his words carefully. "Happier? Maybe. I don't know. You smile more." She smiled faintly. "I guess I just stopped waiting for things to change on their own." Tom nodded slowly. "Maybe I should do the same." That was the first honest conversation they'd had in years. It wasn't deep, but it was real, and real felt like progress. Over the next few weeks, they began to share small moments again. Coffee on the porch. Evening walks through the neighborhood. Quiet laughter over something silly on TV. It was slow, hesitant, but genuine. Tom had begun to notice her again, not in the way he once did, but as if he was seeing her for the first time after a long fog one morning, while sorting through old boxes in the attic. Laura found a photo album from their early years together, pictures of their first home, their honeymoon, Hannah as a baby. She smiled at one picture where Tom had his arm around her, both laughing uncontrollably at something the camera hadn't caught. She couldn't remember the joke, but she remembered the warmth of that time. That evening, she brought the album downstairs and set it on the dining table. When Tom came home, he paused, surprised. "I haven't seen that in ages," he said, sitting down beside her. "I found it today," Laura said. "We look so young." Tom chuckled softly. "We were, and foolish." She smiled. "Maybe we still are." They went through the photos together, and for a while, it felt like they were rediscovering their own story, the one they had almost forgotten. As the weeks passed, the house felt alive again, not because of new paint or fixed tiles, but because of shared laughter and open windows. The silence had softened. But one afternoon, while Laura was watering the plants, she noticed an envelope in the mail. The handwriting was familiar. Her heart skipped. It was from Ethan. She stood there for a moment, unsure whether to open it. Finally, she sat on the porch steps and carefully tore the envelope. Inside was a short note. "Hi, Mrs. Bennet. I hope this letter finds you well. I wanted to thank you again for everything. Working in your home helped me see what kind of business I want to build. Not just fixing things, but helping people feel proud of their spaces again. I moved to Portland and started my own company. It's small, but it's mine. I wanted to let you know that your kindness made a bigger difference than you realize. You reminded me that real work isn't about buildings, it's about people. Take care of yourself. The world needs more people like you." Ethan. Laura read the letter twice. It was simple, heartfelt, and respectful. She felt tears gather at the corners of her eyes. Not from sadness, but from gratitude. He hadn't written to stir feelings. He'd written to say thank you. That night, she showed the letter to Tom. "Who's Ethan?" he asked casually. "The handyman who fixed the bathroom a while back," she said. "He wrote to say thank you." Tom nodded, reading the note. "Seems like a good kid." Laura said quietly. Tom handed the letter back and smiled. "You've always had that effect on people, you know, making them feel seen." Laura was quiet for a moment. "I think I just forgot that for a while." Tom reached across the table and touched her hand. It wasn't a grand gesture, but it was something. "Maybe we both did," he said softly. From that evening on, Laura felt something shift between them. Again, not the spark of youth, but the comfort of companionship. They began planning small things together, repainting the guest room, hosting a dinner for neighbors, even visiting their daughter in Seattle. Slowly, their home became what it once was, a place of laughter, warmth, and understanding. But Laura never forgot Ethan's note. She kept it folded inside the photo album, a quiet reminder of how one brief encounter could ripple through a life and change its direction. A few months later, she received a message from Hannah. Her daughter wanted them to visit for her birthday. It had been years since they'd celebrated as a family. Tom agreed immediately, and Laura felt a genuine spark of excitement. The trip was simple but healing. Watching her daughter laugh, seeing Tom help in the kitchen, it reminded her that time didn't always erase love. Sometimes it just covered it in dust until someone was willing to wipe it clean. One evening, as she stood by the balcony overlooking Seattle's skyline, Laura thought back to everything that had happened in the last year. The cracked bathroom wall, the lonely nights, the unexpected kindness of a young handyman. It had all led her back to herself. She realized now that infidelity isn't always about action. Sometimes it's about the heart drifting away unnoticed. But hearts, like homes, can be repaired with patience, honesty, and care. When they returned to Bend, Tom surprised her by saying, "I was thinking we could finally build that garden you always talked about." Laura looked at him in surprise. "You remember that?" He smiled. "I'm starting to remember a lot of things." They spent the next few weekends working side by side, planting flowers and vegetables. The work was simple but meaningful. Every seed they placed in the soil felt like a promise, small act of rebuilding. One afternoon, Laura sat on the bathroom sofa, the same place where everything had started months ago. The walls still looked smooth and clean. She smiled, remembering the first time she'd watched Ethan work there, and the way that small repair had opened a window in her life. Tom knocked gently on the door. "You okay in there?" She smiled. "I'm fine. Just thinking." He leaned against the doorway. "About what?" About how sometimes life breaks in strange places, she said softly, and how fixing one thing can end up repairing another. Tom nodded, stepping closer. Guess we've both learned that lesson. They shared a quiet moment to people who had nearly lost each other, but found their way back through the cracks. Later that evening, as the sunset painted the sky in orange and gold, Laura wrote a short reply to Ethan's letter. Dear Ethan, thank you for your note. I'm glad to hear you followed your dream. You were right, sometimes fixing what's broken starts with noticing it. I hope your new business brings you the same peace you helped me find. Take care of yourself. You made more of a difference than you know. Laura Bennett. She sealed the envelope, smiling to herself. It wasn't about holding on. It was about closure, gratitude, and moving forward. That night, she and Tom sat together on the porch, sipping tea and watching fireflies light up the dark. The air smelled of blooming jasmine and fresh soil. For the first time in years, Laura felt completely at home, not in her house, but in her own life. The cracks were gone. The walls stood firm. And inside, her heart finally felt repaired.